So on being a pure hard-nosed numbers person, you might say that's displayed higher productivity, more investigations, more work. You've reduced the time to completion. Why do you think you've been more? Why have you been getting more work? There are more complaints coming to you.
Well, actually, it's very interesting. Our complaint numbers, our contacts dropped by about 10% this year. Okay. That was around the COVID lockdown time. So before COVID, we were tracking to have the most contacts ever. COVID hit. Everyone started working from home. We had to modify our work practices to take into account access to telephones and that sort of thing. But now that we're back, pretty much back, barring this slight lockdown recently, our contacts have again tracked up for another bumper year this year. But I think what we have been doing is working much more closely to the legislation. So that means we make decisions about whether we refer things back to the service to facilitate them to deal with it, with the complainant. We refer things into conciliation or investigation. We refer them out to another organisation, or we take no further action. And those are really the options available to us. So at the moment, it's not necessarily saying that previous commissioners or the previous staff in the office weren't working hard, but we're working more closely to the legislation now.
Okay, so that's the efficiency, productivity component. That's interesting. So you're managing perhaps to work your staff more effectively?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think we're becoming more efficient in the way that we deal with complaints, and that's really a pleasing circumstance for me. One of the things that I'm really concerned about is making sure that we provide a customer service focus to the people of South Australia, and if we're working more efficiently, then in fact we're being more customer service focused.
Yes, and I was going to ask you, in fact, if COVID had caused an increase in complaints, but maybe you're saying, one, there was less interaction with anybody, so that activity probably reduced on that level. But I'm also thinking a lot of the the health facilities were effectively closed to anyone except those who had the virus.
So, yes, there were restrictions about people entering health services, and that sort of decreased the number of things that we were seeing. And I think the other interesting part of that, Antonio, is that people, when there is a big public emergency like a pandemic or a bushfire or a flood or an earthquake or something of that nature, people, in my experience, tend to put that into perspective.
Different priorities.
Yeah, that's right. So we tend to see a dip in complaints in any case when those sorts of things happen.
Now, you mentioned that you've reduced the number of complaints that have been open for more than 12 months, and you say you've got 10 still going at the moment.
That's right.
How have you managed to do that? Is that because you've focused more on certain complaints and have been able to work more intensively on them, or are they a different nature?
That's a great question. They tend to be more complex complaints, but we know that the further away from the time the service was provided that gave rise to the complaint, the more difficult it is to resolve. So I asked my staff, and they rose to the challenge to focus on those complaints so that we obtained a resolution for people regardless of complexity. And again, this is in line with my desire for a customer service focus. No one wants their complaint open for longer than 12 months. 12 months, in fact, is probably too long as well. There are often extenuating circumstances, but we know that if we can resolve things relatively quickly, then people walk away with better outcomes, and we can repair that relationship between the service provider and the consumer.
Cool. Time has gone very quickly.
It has.
As it normally does.
Yes.
Normally does. And in fact, I didn't even stop for our sponsors break messages, so we'll have to run them in a minute. But we usually ask if you would like to choose some music or in particular.
Yes.
And what are we going to do? We're sticking with opera?
I think we're sticking with opera. Is it Pagliacci? Is it
Pagliacci?
Yes.
The Clowns.
Is that what we?
Ridi Pagliaccio, Luciano Pavarotti, and let's. So in the meantime, I'll say thank you to Grant Davies for having come to Radio Italia Adelaide, and until next time, we'll go with Luciano Pavarotti and Ridi Pagliaccio.
Thanks for having me, Antonio.